Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Austria once again, and we're going to have a look at yet another of the beers that arrived in the Hans box. So first and foremost, a massive shout out and thank you to Hans Feigl, my Austrian beer mule living in Vienna. You might have seen that recently he sent me a box of about 12 or 13 different Austrian beers, mainly Vienna lagers this time with a few other things dotted in, and he's indicated that he's happy to do this again in the future. So the channel now has an official Austrian beer mule, and as I've told you previously, Austrian beer is usually quite difficult to get a hold of unless you're in Austria itself. So I'm really curious to see what the Austrian beer market has in store for us. So yeah, Hans, massive thank you to you for making this review and the other ones possible, and I hope that you guys watching the channel enjoy seeing some Austrian beers here over the next little while. That's a lot of Austria, as we've said in that little section. But anyway, so yeah, for this review then, we are going to stick to Vienna, and we're going to have a look at a beer from another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. So for this one, we will go to the Ottakringer Brauerei for the first time, and we're having a look at the Wiener Original today. This particular beer is a Vienna lager, of course. It comes in at 5.3% ABV, and from what Hans tells me, this one is supposed to be pretty nice actually. These guys are one of the bigger boys on the Austrian beer in the Austrian beer market, from what I understand. But yeah, very curious to see how it turns out. Hopefully you guys enjoy my take on this one, and hopefully it's as good as the one we had from Schweichater. So yeah, let's get cracking with this review then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Ottakringer Brauerei. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Austrian beers that I'm reviewing for you, and that will be added to quite regularly over the next little while, I'm sure. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a little bit about Ottakringer Brauerei, and I do apologise in advance for any bad German pronunciations. It's quite hard to get them bang on when you're reading at speed a little bit, but let's try this. So Ottakringer Brauerei, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Vienna, and the brewery opened back in 1837. But the company was founded by Heinrich Planck with the name Plancksche Brauerei, and he had been granted the right to brew beer by the Diocese of Klosterneuburg. A little bit later on, in 1850, the brewery was taken over by the cousins Ignaz and Jakob von Kufner, who came from Lundenberg, and they increased the production of the brewery quite dramatically, over 200% increase in under 10 years, and this took them to a brewery capacity of 64,000 hectolitres. But the brewery expanded further with a new fermentation cellar and warehouse after Kaiser Franz Joseph ordered that the city walls were to be pulled down, and by 1890 the production had reached 170,000 hectolitres, which is pretty impressive when you think about what time and what point in time we're talking about it. But the brewery then passed to Ignaz's son Moritz in 1882, and he grew the production even further to 350,000 hectolitres in the years preceding the First World War. I believe this mark wasn't met again until quite a bit later, but he also changed the company to being a joint stock organisation in 1905. Moritz was later forced to sell the brewery at a lower price than it was valued at prior to the Anschluss between Austria and Germany in 1938, and this was owing to his Jewish background, and the company went into the ownership of Gustav Harmer and his family, and he was actually forced out for a period of time after the Second World War, and the brewery was briefly controlled by the Russians until the Harmer family could prove their purchase, basically, and prove ownership of the company. But Moritz Kufner had died in Zurich, and his heirs were given compensation by the Harmer family for being forced out of the ownership even prior to the restitution laws that were passed in Austria a little bit later on. So the brewery production grew again in the post-war period to 235,000 hectolitres. It kind of recovered, I guess we should say, and this was in 1962. And at this point, Gustav Harmer's brother-in-law, Engelbert Wenkheim, joined the company, and he progressively took over the management of the brewery, which was completed in 1995 when Gustav resigned and then retired, from what I understand. But I think he was doing a few other activities in another company called Harmer Holdings as well, but he retired from his involvement in this brewery. But in 1977, the brewery left the beer cartel, which was known as the Schutzverband RampantLionReviews, which basically it translates into English as the Protection Association of the Alpine Breweries. And this had previously very strictly regulated the geographical supplies of beer. But after this beer cartel broke up, any restaurant could choose which brewery was going to supply them with their beer, regardless of the physical location. But Engelbert continued as the sole director of the company for 5 years until his daughter Christiane took over, along with Siegfried Mintz, who is still running the company today. But the ownership of the brewery is split between a few different families: the Wenkheim, Mintz, Trautenberg, and Fuste-Schmidt, if I'm getting that right. Yeah, Fuste-Schmidt family. And there's a parent company as well called Ottakringer Holding AG, which also owns Voslauer mineral water. So yeah, there is a small percentage of the company is floated on the stock exchange, which I think is about 6% or something, and that's basically how they raise their funds for investing in the brewery and things like that. There was a period of time where part of the brewery was owned by Heineken as well, but then that was gradually bought back. So this brewery is completely Austrian owned, from what I understand. It was a little bit confusing to read all of the different restructuring things that have gone on in the company over the last sort of 30 years or so. But yeah, there was quite a bit of movement went on in the company internally, in the upper echelons, if you like. But yeah, a completely Austrian owned brewery, and as I say, one of the bigger boys in the Austrian beer scene. But a few other kind of things about this brewery is that the Helles beer is their most popular beer, and this is known locally as the Sechsenabich, or Sechsenabich, I think I should say, the Sechsenabich, which is after the 16th district of Vienna, where the original brewery is located. But these guys are also noted as having been the first brewery to bottle their beers in the green shoulder bottles, starting in 1989. Prior to that, it was all brown bottles, from what I understand. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Ottakringer Brauerei for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd, and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. And there's quite an extensive list there. Like I say, the Helles is the most well-known one. The Vienna Lager, I think, is maybe is not too far behind that. But yeah, there's a whole host of different things like Radlers and stuff in there if you go and check out the brewery website. But yeah, that is it for the history section of the video, and I hope that kind of made sense. It felt in some ways like it was quite complicated actually to piece the history of this brewery together. But yeah, basically a completely Austrian owned brewery that's passed down different parts of the one family over the last kind of 150, 160 years actually. But yeah, let's get on and taste the beer itself then. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open it up. This beer is incidentally available in bottles as well. That Hans, of course, sent me the can, I guess, just because it's a little bit more secure in terms of packaging and stuff like this, and a little bit lighter too. But yeah, it is quite nicely presented. This label, of course, you will see on the bottle, and this little spire thing that you can see, this is the original brewery actually. But yeah, that's also on the bottom here as well. You can see the sort of outline of the original brewery building there, but seit über 118 Jahren Wiener beer type. So yeah, nicely presented. Half litre this one, as you'll always get in Austria. And yeah, I'm guessing that this beer must have cost, like, I don't know if the prices are quite as cheap in Austria as they are in Germany. I think Austria's a little bit more expensive, but this beer's probably somewhere between like €1 and €1.50 for a can. So yeah, can't knock that at all. But yeah, pardon me, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the taste then. A 5.3% Vienna Lager, and another one of the big Austrian breweries. So yeah, let's get out and see how we go. Got my nice Pilsner Urquell tankard out again for this one. So yeah, I definitely need to get back to Austria at some point and take a look at some of the breweries in the Vienna area. But yeah, definitely very cool of Hans to send me up some Austrian stuff. I was a bit of an opportunist when I saw Hans. He commented on one of my videos and said he was commenting from Austria, so I asked him if he could arrange an Austrian beer box for me, and he was quite happy to do it. So yeah, awesome of him to do that. Always cool to have followers on the channel that are going to do these things for you. So I think the head on this one is going to disappear quite quickly, but you can see it poured with about a finger and a half, maybe a little bit more, of a kind of frothy white head, but that has turned out to actually be quite bumpy. You can see the head is going to fade away quite quickly on this one, I would suspect, but you can see the beer has poured a lovely kind of coppery colour. If we shine the light through this one, this is definitely one of the lighter Vienna lagers I've come across in recent times, in fact. So yeah, that is definitely quite interesting actually. So this beer is brewed with Viennese and Melanoidin malts, and it's hopped with Sats hops as well, or Žatec as the Czechs would call them. So yeah, Czech Žatec hops in this beer. And it's kind of interesting that, because when you think about the history of this brewery, at the time these beers would have first been created, it would have been part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Czech Republic, of course, was part of that, so it makes sense that they still use these now Czech hops, pardon me, today, in fact. So kind of interesting. But like I said, in terms of colour, this one strikes me as being a little bit lighter than some of the other Vienna lagers that I've come across before. So yeah, definitely more of a kind of light, kind of coppery colour. It's almost the same colour as like a German Märzen, come to think of it. But yeah, remember the basic definition of a lager beer is a cold temperature fermentation. These are bottom fermenting yeasts that you'll use in lager beers. The fermentation takes place between about 8 and I think at maximum about 12 degrees, something like that. And yeah, you've got various different types of lagers. So I mean, you have the Helles, which is the blonde lager, the Dunkel, which is the kind of more mahogany type coloured one. You've got the Schwarz beers as well, which are the kind of black ones. And of course you have the Svetli, the Cherny and the Tmavi in the Czech Republic as well, which are those the kind of Czech derivatives of these. You've got the Märzen, which has the Letzak derivative in the Czech Republic as well. You've got things like Bock beers, Doppelbocks and stuff like this. And then of course you have the Vienna Lager. So yeah, this one is a kind of style on its own, but it's a little bit more bready than a German Märzen would be. The main difference for me between the German and the Czech lagers would be the fact that the German ones come across as a little bit more clean and crisp, whereas the Czech ones are a little bit more yeasty, and thus you get a wee bit of kind of breadiness out of them. But the Vienna lagers for me are usually a little bit more kind of rounded and caramelly and oily in a sense. That's how I've always kind of interpreted the Vienna lager. So yeah, for me a Vienna lager is quite a smooth, bready and slightly more oily and kind of caramelly lager beer, in fact. So yeah, I'm curious to see how that translates into this one. But like I say, the colour of this beer is lighter, and the thing that determines the colour of your beer, of course, is 1, what type of malts that you use, and then 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour of beer. Barrel aging and adjuncts, of course, will play a role in that, but those 2 factors are not at play in this particular beer. This is a traditional Austrian, Viennese, whatever you want to call it, lager beer. But yeah, certainly looks the part. As I say, a little bit lighter than some others I've seen before. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, but a steady stream of carbonation going up towards the surface of the beer there. But it certainly looks very, very nice. Nothing madly surprising about this beer when you consider what style it is. But let's have a closer look at the aroma of this one then, and just see how we get on. Yeah, kind of exactly as you'd expect, to be honest with you. I love the aroma of these, can we call them traditional Central European beers, the Czech, the German, the Austrians, you know, whatever, lager beers. I love these. I think, you know, when we're talking about craft beer generally, I think these lager beers have really been neglected for far too long. The Germans are the masters of, you know, mass producing the beers, and then the Austrian, you know, you would probably kind of have to consider the Austrians and the Czechs in that bracket as well. You know, there's a different art to producing lager beers like this. Quite often they are mass produced, but the quality control is something else on these. But you know, it's a beautiful smelling beer, this one, and it is exactly what you'd expect. There's nothing surprising about this beer on the aroma. But let's try and break this down for you a little bit. So, backbone of this beer is a lovely, smooth, kind of wholemeal, brown bready sort of thing. You do get a fair bit of graininess out of this beer, which is interesting. So yeah, it's got a mix of bread crusty elements in there. You will get 1 or 2 very, very small, like slightly woody, kind of nutty-ish undertones to the beer. But yeah, the backbone of this beer is distinctly bready, and a wholemeal brown bread and bread crusty at that, actually. So yeah, quite a few interesting things going on with this beer. Absolutely, the aroma really grows on me. I love the smell of these. But yeah, in the centre of the nose then, you do get a nice little bit of a straight up kind of sweet caramel out of this one. You can smell that it gets a little bit biscuity towards the kind of extremities of the nose too, but that sits on top of that kind of wholemealy, brown bready sort of thing that I was talking about too. So yeah, aroma profile of this beer, I think, is very, very nice. Kind of, as I say, what you would expect. But yeah, I think it gets a bit more bready and kind of grainy the more that you smell of it. But the brown sugary elements in there, that sweet caramel, the McVitie's digestive sort of biscuity kind of thing you get out of this one is good. I'm not sure how good a reference McVitie's digestive biscuits are to Austrians, but yeah, it's a little bit like a kind of cookie-ish sort of grainy biscuity type thing that you get out of this one. So yeah, it definitely smells a little bit more kind of bready than the Schweichater that we had before. Actually, there's definitely a little bit more of a kind of grainy element to this one from what I remember. But yeah, that's your malty part of the beer. On the hoppy side of things, you've got a nice little touch of earthiness in there, which you would expect. Good little bit of floral aromaticity also. It comes across as quite sort of bright and almost a little touch spicy. You would expect that of the Czech Sats hops, and in comparison to the German ones, of course, the German noble hops are going to give you a more sort of they're going to give you a kind of bigger brightness, if that makes sense, whereas if you go to the Slovenian noble hops, the Styrian hops, they're going to give you a little bit more kind of smoothness, if you like, in their green component. So yeah, you do get a little bit of that kind of floral spiciness out of the Sats hops in this. You get a good bit of grassiness in there as well, and a little touch of zestiness. So to be honest with you, there's nothing particularly surprising about this beer in terms of the green component. So I can certainly appreciate that. Although the thing I would say about this beer is that the more I smell of it, the slightly more earthy it gets as well, which is interesting. But yeah, on the fruity side of things, it is what you would expect. There's a teeny little touch of a very slight red fruity thing for me, like I don't really want to say candied strawberry, but maybe a teeny little bit of a kind of figgy, or maybe slightly curranty, red curranty kind of thing in there. But yeah, getting quite a little bit of an appley and peary ester out of it. So yeah, these are all things that you can expect a little bit from the Vienna Lager. So yeah, definitely quite a bit of pear for me, little touch of apple in there. You do get some of those grassy esters as well, which is interesting. But yeah, a wee bit of a sort of sultana-y note in there as well. By sultanas, I mean like dried white, green sort of grapes. You do get a little bit of that in this one. But yeah, pear, apple, sultana, a little bit of a kind of slightly figgy or red curranty element in there as well. But it's sort of a dried fruit. You get a lot of dried fruit aroma out of this beer. Yeah, sultanas and pears for me are the most kind of prominent thing coming out of this one. But yeah, these are all elements that you would expect of a Vienna Lager. So take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this one before you get stuck into it. But I think we need to try this one now. So yeah, this one is the Wiener Original, 5.3% Vienna Lager beer from Ottakringer Brauerei in Vienna, down in Austria. Let's get stuck into this one. Thank you again to Hans for making this review possible. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and prost. Yeah, that's pretty nice, I have to say. Yeah, as you'd kind of expect, very, very easy beer to drink, this one. And what you pick up in the aroma with this beer translates very well into the flavour, absolutely. Yeah, I like this one. As I say, these lager beers are designed to be nice and drinkable, and that's exactly what you get out of this one. Yeah, certainly would not hesitate to drink this beer again. I'll need to try the Helles from these guys at some stage as well, of course. But yeah, that is Pretty awesome, I have to say. I really like that. So, where do we start with this one? Where do we start with this? The other first impression I would say that I have with this one is it does feel, definitely feels a little bit more kind of bready, but also a bit more biscuity than I remember the Schweichater being as well. And we've, as I say, we've got quite a few Vienna lagers in the fridge, so we're going to see a lot of different aspects and a lot of different leanings in all these different beers. They vary from brewery to brewery, of course, which is great. But yeah, you can see how easy these are to drink. Absolutely. So, straight away with this beer then, right across the middle of your palate, you get that nice sort of brown, wholemealy, bready sort of thing. That just blankets that middle third of your tongue, absolutely. As you progress further into the aftertaste, you can feel a few more kind of grainy elements pushing out of it. You get a little bit of that sort of bread crusty thing, which I really like. So, yeah, this beer, in that sense, gets a big thumbs up from me. In the very centre of your palate, you do get a nice kind of straight up sweet caramel to this one. Yeah, straight up sweet caramel in the middle of your palate. And as you move further out from that, there's a little bit of a kind of there is a little bit more of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing in there. I don't know whether I want to say there's a wee touch of toasted caramel to this one. But maybe there is just a wee slightly touch of a kind of toasted caramel thing there. But yeah, like I say, quite a concentrated sweet caramel in the very centre of your palate. As you move further out from that, it gets a little bit more sort of toasty and caramelly. Then as you progress out towards the very extremities of your palate, that's when you get the more kind of grainy McVitie's digestive biscuity cookies sort of thing coming out of this one. But yeah, all of that kind of brown sugary element sits on top of a kind of brown wholemealy bready base that gets a little bit more grainy the further you go into it. You get a little bit more of a kind of bread crusty element to the beer as well. And yeah, it's quite straight shooting in that kind of middle third of your palate, if you like. If you go to the front corners of your palate, then go diagonally back, you will find a few kind of woody undertones to the beer, but again, these are really quite subtle. So yeah, that's you will like how that goes together. But yeah, it works. Certainly works quite nicely. And I do, as I say, I get more and more graininess out of this beer the further into the aftertaste that I go. But yeah, on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a little bit more of a kind of bready, doughy kind of build up there. You get a bit more of a kind of grainy strength to the beer as well. But then on the you know, on the kind of back third of your palate, you have more of a kind of brown, grainy, bready sort of thing to it as well, which I can really appreciate too. So yeah, the grainy notes really come into play on that back third of your palate, which is quite interesting. But on top of that, of course, you can feel the height. You can feel you can feel the sort of yeasty elements coming out of the beer. So yeah, you've got a little bit of a you have a little bit of a more kind of just the flavour's just a little bit taller. So on top of the back third of your palate, you can feel those sort of slightly more airy, yeasty notes kind of coming out of the beer, and you can feel that just sitting there. So if when you start at the back third of your palate, the beer, the sort of height of the beer, the height of the flavour kind of starts off like this. It gradually condenses down, then as you go into that middle third of your palate, it condenses down quite a lot, and then just the middle third of your palate is quite kind of condensed and squashed together in terms of the flavour. But it certainly works, and that's that's it for that kind of middle, for the kind of malty and slightly yeasty side of the beer. On the hoppy side of things, again, it's kind of what you'd expect. Back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, you've got a little bit of a more kind of herbally sort of thing to it, which I really like. And then it's interesting to pick that up from the Czech Sats, obviously, but then as you move further forward onto the front corners of your palate, it develops a little bit more of a kind of green spiciness there. And as I say, that is, it's not madly spicy like the American hops, but by, you know, relative to the other noble type hops that you get, it is a wee touch kind of spicy. But yeah, nice green component there. Around the front curve of the palate, it's distinctly lighter and a little bit more kind of citrusy and grassy as well. So yeah, I like how that goes together, absolutely. Yeah, the grassy side of this beer is it's very nice as well. So yeah, you do get a wee bit of grassy zestiness on that kind of front curve of your tongue there. But let's focus on that front third of the palate where you get the kind of juicy fruity esters and things coming out of the beer. So yeah, front third, on that border region between front third and middle third of your tongue, again you get a little bit of a sort of doughy, bready build up there, which I really like. A bit more of a kind of grainy element to it as well, but then the base of that front third of your palate is a little bit more kind of brown bready in a sense as well. So you get a nice kind of brown bready, grainy element out of the beer, and then sitting on top of that you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, interesting how this how all of that pieces together, absolutely. But yeah, let's focus on that fruity part of the beer. So yeah, it is kind of what you would expect in a sense. So for me, I do get quite a little bit of a kind of sultana dried thing, like those dry white, green, grapey elements. There's quite a bit of that in this one. That's at the back of that front third of your palate. But as you move further forward, it gradually develops more of a kind of peary ester to it. You do get a little bit of apple in this one, but there is a wee underline of a sort of curranty type thing to this one. But yeah, sultanas, pears, bit of a curranty thing in the middle of that front third of your tongue, and then yeah, it's got a wee bit of a kind of grassy, zesty kind of element to it as well. So yeah, that front third of your palate works very, very nicely. So yeah, I like that about this beer. I do like that about this beer for sure. The fruity side of things is nice, and you know, the thing that strikes me about this beer overall as a Vienna lager, like I said, it's a bit more bready, but the slightly more prominent dried fruity element that you get out of it, and you get a wee bit more earthiness and graininess as well. It all just kind of fits together well. It really, all the flavours kind of complement each other quite well, I have to say, in this. So compared to the other one that we had from Schweikater, this is definitely a more kind of grainy and bready example of the Vienna lager style, in my opinion. So yeah, the other one, the Schweikater, was definitely a little bit more oily and sweet in a sense. So we're starting to see a few different things in this style, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to try the Vienna lagers, because I've only had a couple of them prior to these ones, and never any kind of authentic Austrian examples. So always cool to learn about different styles of beer, 100%. But yeah, to round off the review then with the mouthfeel then with the beer, what would we say? You know, top end, the light bodied, the carbonation is very smooth. The beer does have an element of oiliness and slickness to it, which I think you're always going to get with a Vienna lager, because you do have that brown sugary element which is inherent for the style. In terms of bitterness, I think, you know, this is a 15-20 IBU beer, something like that. It's not going to blow the head off you in terms of IBUs. The malty base in this one, like I say, it's got a bit of a grainy backbone to it, but then a bit of a kind of sweeter brown sugary thing on top of it, a bit more of a biscuity kind of thing, and then a dried kind of fruity character to it as well, a little bit more dry and oily kind of side of things too. But yeah, the fruity side of the beer, dry fruit, and it just goes together really nicely. So yeah, one of these beers where everything just fits together very, very well. But I think we can round off this review there then. So this one was the Wiener Original, a really nice kind of sort of grainy, bready, biscuity, and sort of dried fruity Vienna lager for me. This one's really showing the more kind of, dare we say, rustic side of the Vienna lager. So yeah, this was interesting. It's cool to see already having not been madly experienced with this style prior to doing some of the Austrian originals, that there is such diversity within it. So I look forward to seeing what the microbrewed versions of this style are in the coming reviews. So yeah, you can certainly look forward to those. But yeah, this one, the Wiener Original from Ottakringer Brauerei in Vienna, 5.3% Vienna lager. This one, I've really enjoyed this review, so let's leave it there. Thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out my other reviews, and let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. See you guys in the next one, the Wiener Original from Ottakringer Brauerei in Vienna. Really glad that I got to review this one. Thank you again to Hans for making this review possible. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and prost.